Hey everybody, it's Wednesday. Welcome to the live stream. I am Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author, I'm a writing teacher, I'm the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own program that is designed to get writers from where they are to where they dream of being. We dive deep into story structure. We dive deep into writing craft. We work on our mindsets and we have a great time doing it. So that's what Path of the Storyteller is all about. And on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, I am live with all of you, my storytelling crew. I'm going to turn on the comments so I can see who's here. What characters have shown up for today's chat? See what I did there? Our topic today is character archetypes, and that is something that I love to talk about, and it's going to be really great. Before we dive in, if you're watching live on Facebook, please feel free to do the StreamYard thing. Go to streamyard.com/Facebook and just click so that I have permission to see your name so we can all know who's here, right? Thank you so much for doing that. Putting the blue stripe away. I hope everyone is well today. I hope all of you marvelous characters out there are thriving and ready to explore the many, many facets of character archetypes. This is a question that came in from one of you, so I know that there's a lot of interest in this. So, story structure, which is one of my pet topics. Every time you've heard me talk about it in the past, you know that I start with the hero. I start with the main character, and I will preach it until you guys get sick of me preaching it. You must think of your story as a journey of transformation for your hero, your main character, your protagonist. Hero does not mean someone who dresses in a unitard, goes into, phone booths and changes their identity, comes out to save the world. I mean, it might mean that. But what I mean by hero is hero in the archetypal sense, not in the comic book sense. What does that mean? Archetype. An archetype, there's a lot of things that an archetype could mean. If you're a Jungian, a psychiatrist, archetype means something very particular to you. In a general definition, and one that's useful to writers, an archetype is the type of interaction, the type of energetic force, if you will, that acts upon the hero of your tale in order to further their journey of transformation. So we can talk about the hero themselves as an archetype, and the meaning of the archetype of the hero is the one who goes through the journey of transformation. What is associated with the hero archetype? It is change. It is a journey of change from one state of being or one's way of living or one state of consciousness to a very different one. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to focus on the kind of heroes where they follow a progression that leaves them better than they were at the beginning. Most stories are like that. Not all stories are like that. There is such a thing as the anti-hero, the tragic hero, the hero that goes on a journey of change that kind of goes amiss, or that is following the wrong path, or cannot fundamentally change, that they start out in a very flawed situation and they're not able to fix it. And the consequences of that come to home to roost, and things end usually sort of badly. And so we call those tragic figures. I'm going to put that aside from now, just so we can sort of just talk about the basic version of this, because it is going to be the one that applies to most of the stories you read and probably most of the stories you write. The hero is a dynamic character. The hero is not static, right? The hero is there to change. That sounds tiring. Like, even sometimes changing your clothes is tiring, right? Remember in the days when we used to go out and leave our homes, we'd be like, I don't feel like getting dressed, so I'll stay home. So think about a hero. A hero has to undergo not just a change of outfit, but a change of consciousness, a movement from who they are at the beginning to the very expanded sense of themselves at the end, as someone who's been through a lot, who's gone way outside their comfort zone, who's probably taken on a new identity, who's braved tests and gone through some kind of essential ordeal and dealt with consequences, and often, as one of our great storytelling mentors, Joseph Campbell, points out, often has to confront the need to sacrifice something that is dear to them in order to really get to the end of this hero's journey, which not only improves their own internal state, but kind of rains down blessings upon the world at large, or something larger than themselves, maybe a community, a family, other people, an environment, whatever suits your story. All of these things work. So think of all of the energy that it takes to change on that level. If you've gone through a huge change in your life, you know it's arduous. Where does this energy come from? Aha, back to my definition of archetypes. So the hero is an archetypal character because they have these qualities. No matter what type of hero you write, no matter who your individual hero is, they're going to have these kind of energetic qualities. The other characters in your tale, what we call the secondary characters, the non-hero characters, they are sources of energy. They are like the places where your story can recharge and draw energy into this arduous journey of transformation. There's no way that the hero can start a tale that's going to take them on a meaningful journey with a sufficient battery pack strapped to them to carry them through the whole tale. Each scene, each encounter is going to find a way to contribute story energy to this journey of transformation. And the archetypal characters are the characters that deliver this energy. Intrigued, right? Maybe not what you were expecting me to say. There are some kind of classical archetypal characters that work really, really well in order to do this, to perform this function. So what I want to do in our talk today is I'm going to run through the main ones, the ones that I find are more than sufficient to design a cast of characters that will get your hero all the way to the finish line. They're kind of like, when you watch a marathon and there are people standing at the curb, handing glasses of water and sort of just adding energy to the journey. That's what the archetypal characters do. But that doesn't mean that they're all helpful. In fact, they're not all helpful. And why is that? Well, when someone is going on a journey of change, we've talked about this before. When someone needs to change, it's not always the encouragement that lights the fire to transform someone. It's the challenge. It's the pressure, right? Things change under pressure. Big changes often happen as a result of significant pressure. So some of the archetypal characters that I'm going to talk about today are going to be the ones that hand the glass of Gatorade to your hero as they go on their journey of transformation of consciousness. We love those characters, but some of them are going to be the ones who challenge your hero. Some of them are going to be the ones who make sure your hero doesn't take herself too seriously. Some of them are going to be the ones that mess with your hero's head, right? In order to create to dislocate the current identity and thus make space for the new identity to take root. Any change involves welcoming something new and also leaving behind something old. So we have this force. This is a great, Joseph Campbell would have fun talking to you about this if he were here. The wheel of creation and destruction, right? That happens in myth, is embodied, manifested in different forms in mythology from different traditions. When there's going to be creation, there also has to be destruction. The old must give way to the new. that dynamic is at the very heart of the hero archetype, that they are in that incredible space. So what's on the wheel? There's forces of creation, forces of encouragement, and forces of destruction, or we can call them, impediments, obstacles, challenges. So I hope I've whet your appetite. I'm just going to whiz through a bunch of these and leave time for questions, because I think this is going to be a real fun discussion. But as I go through these, feel free to imagine, all of you who are here. Hey, Terry. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Rosalind. Great to see you. I want you to think about not only maybe the stories that you're in the midst of writing or conceiving or imagining, but also stories that you know, and see if you can recognize how some of these archetypal energies work in stories. It sounds sort of heady to talk about, but in the practical sense, some of your favorite characters are rich cocktails of archetypal energies. And notice I said cocktails, not just a plain glass of wine, though that's always a nice thing, but a mix. Sometimes the most memorable characters in our stories are the ones who combine different archetypal energies. So we'll talk about that too. All right. We've talked a hot minute about the hero and what constitutes the archetypal energy of the hero. So I'm just going to zoom on to some other archetypes, and I'm going to talk about them in kind of in a sequence. And there's no laundry list. There's no recipe here for how these must happen in any story. So don't take this as like instructions, but I'm going to explore them in a way that's typical in terms of when your hero might encounter them. So your hero begins the story. He's got all this, need for change going on, whether they know it or not. And something very near the beginning of your story, maybe even on the first page, is going to happen. That's news that hasn't happened before. That's out of the ordinary. It's the thing that's going to tip the reader off as to why this particular story begins on this day and not any other day, not a week before, not a week after. This is the day the story starts. So something happens. Chances are there's going to be some way that new information gets in. So that is a powerful addition of story energy right there, right? We call that the herald archetype. Now, a herald, obviously, traditionally was the one who shows up. I have news. I have a message from the king, right? That's the herald archetype. Super easy to remember. You will use the herald archetype many, many times in a story. Anytime that an important new piece of information arrives to kind of cause what happens next or make the hero need to respond. Is the herald a guy with a trumpet? On occasion, in some stories, the herald is a guy on a trumpet who arrives on a horse and jumps off and says, I have news from the king. But that's not how archetypal energies work. Maybe it's not a person at all. Maybe it's an advertisement in the newspaper. Maybe it's a locket that your hero finds that has a little message tucked in it. Maybe it's an object that delivers news. Maybe it's something they encounter by accident. Maybe it's right. There could be all kinds of ways that information gets in. So right away, let's dispense with the notion that a character archetype is of necessity a character. It often is. And characters must be archetypes, but archetypes need not be characters. Let's put it that way. So the herald archetype, the deliverer of news. Think about all the ways news gets delivered in the stories you know. Here's a great one. Once your hero has gotten some news, and they maybe the feeling that things have to change is brought to a head by this arrival of news, and your hero may in fact start trying to change things. Maybe there's been some kind of invitation to an adventure that's arrived. Maybe the herald brought that. Right away, what happens? Obstacles arise. Now, you know this from your own lives, right? Whenever you try to really level up and you really decide, no, I'm going to play big today. I'm going to try something that's outside my comfort zone. I'm going to go for it right now. Immediately, what happens? The internet goes out, your computer crashes, you get a phone call, the pet gets sick, you got to go to the vet. Life has a way of knowing like the worst possible moment to throw a little speed bump in front of us. And this truth that we all experience, people say, oh, it must be Mercury retrograde, whether you believe in that or not. We have this way of identifying like, oh, an obstacle came at the worst possible time. What do these mean? Well, what they mean in life, I will leave for you and your personal philosophy to unravel. But what they mean in storytelling is, yeah, your hero is starting on a path and their commitment right away is tested. How able are they to do this? How serious are they about change? A lot of people talk a good game, but actions speak louder than words. And that is true even in fiction, which is all made of words. But we use these words as good storytellers to convey story energy. So it's the actions that our heroes take that actually comprise the story, right? The words are just a way of conveying that deliciousness to our readers. So we call this archetype, this barrier that has a tendency to spring up, the threshold guardian archetype. So it's very much what it sounds like. If there's a door, it's like the bouncer at the door. Like if you want to get in, you got to get past the bouncer. How many great fairy tales have that element, right? Of, oh, if you want to cross my bridge, you have to answer my riddles. There's a troll living underneath. That's a threshold guardian. It's the one who puts your hero to the test of their commitment. And sometimes a threshold guardian can wear the mask of a friend or family or a helper and has this reaction, which is extremely accurate if you think about it, that the hero wants to change and the world around them says, no, don't change. If you change, we'll be uncomfortable. We want you to stay just the way you are. Sometimes it's a misguided kindness, but sometimes it's the fact that change breeds resistance. And as soon as your hero changes, around them, there will be forces of resistance. Within them, there may be forces of resistance, right? They may have limiting beliefs. They may be worried what other people might think. They may lack confidence, or they may lack caution. They may be insufficiently cautious. Maybe they're just risk takers and they don't think things through. Whatever inside your hero acts to trip them up, or tries to trip them up as they make their kind of baby steps toward the destiny that awaits for them. That is threshold guardian energy. So once again, you can see that it might very well be a character. It could be an unhelpful clerk at the store. It could be a message absorbed by the hero from their family system that, no, our family doesn't do that. Our family, we stick to our hometown, or we don't try, we don't take those kinds of adventures. Just like, for example, my friend Bilbo Baggins, my warm, close personal friend, he's a hobbit. We don't go on adventures. We don't do things that are unrespectable. Those are threshold guardian type beliefs. So how do they add energy to the story? That's the question, right? How do they add energy to the story? Well, what happens when you encounter an obstacle? Think about what happens. You encounter an obstacle. Do you turn around and go home? You might want to. That's the moment where the hero sort of refuses, has this moment of like, oh, I don't think I can do this. But then you muster fresh reserves. You dig deeper. You get smarter. You think strategically. You MacGyver a solution, right? You figure out a way. And so the minute that obstacle, that threshold guardian energy, is kind of spooned into the hero's journey, and we're still can be quite early in the tale, right? The minute that happens, the hero has to level up a little bit. They've got to say, no, I'm not going to let this hold me back. So all of a sudden, like the wheel of story is turning a little bit. You start to see that there's a little current running through and it's turning. I'm going to take a moment just to check in with some of the questions. We've got some great ones coming in. So we've got can a character be both encouraging, energizing, and challenging to the hero? And we've also got, I'm going to just cluster these. Can a character transform from an archetype to another as the hero story progresses, right? So these questions are a bit related, and they both address, Rosalind, thank you for these great questions. They both address this idea of how do you make not just a delivery system for a single archetypal energy, but how do you make a complex cocktail of archetypal energy? I definitely want to talk about that for sure. Before I do that, though, I'm going to run through a few of the different archetypes so that we can use them as examples. So let me finish doing that. And I really want to circle back to Rosalind's question because it is so key. It's so key. How do you design your cast of characters using these archetypal energies? Great thing to discuss. All right, we've talked about the hero, we've talked about the herald, we've talked about threshold guardians. One of the ways in which a hero makes progress in their journey of transformation is by coming into contact with a mentor. The mentor archetype is one that I'm sure is very familiar to you all. It is the wise teacher. It is the coach. It is the wizard, the Dumbledore, the Gandalf, the Dumbledore, the one who has been through the journey of transformation before and has now returned to mentor. That's one of the definitions of mentor energy. It's not always so, but it's a very useful way to think of the mentor. When we are about to embark on a journey of change, we want to see an example of somebody who's done it before us. We're not inventing right from the whole cloth. We are often looking for a hero of our own to admire, to be inspired by, to draw energy from. And the heroes who have walked the path before very often return, to the world of storytelling in the guise of mentor. And they are there to guide the next generation of heroes onward. So it really doesn't have anything to do with age, right? But it does have to do with experience. The other thing it has to do with is a kind of acuity of vision, because what the mentor is able to see is the hero fully blossomed that lives inside the baby hero that hasn't yet gone on their journey. The mentor archetype is the archetype that can hold space, as we say, hold the vision of what this hero is capable of becoming. They can see the potential in the hero of your story that even that hero cannot see yet. When Glinda the Good Witch says to Dorothy, you could have gone home all along, she's expressing the fact that the potential is in you, that you can do this. And we call that encouragement in real life, but it's a very rich kind of encouragement. It's not facile. It's not superficial. It's not, oh, I believe in you. It's not like, oh, I think you're awesome. It's not that kind of encouragement. It's the kind of encouragement that comes from knowing the path. I know what's in store for you, and I know that you're capable of it. You don't think you are. And a million times as you are on this journey, you're going to say, I can't go any further. This is too hard for me. This was a mistake. And it's the mentor is the one who can just say at those moments, keep going and be believed and have the authority of experience, right? Mentor energy is so potent. It is absolutely magical in real life. And it is an incredible source of story energy in a narrative. So you will find yourself drawing upon mentor energy when you craft your secondary cast of characters. There will be characters or forces or, ways of delivering mentor energy to your hero. I guarantee it. All right. And so by the time we've gotten over a threshold, we've gotten some news from a herald archetype. We've gotten perhaps a call to adventure for our hero. They've dealt with threshold guardians and perhaps, quite likely, some taste of mentor energy has been part of what helps them get past the threshold guardians and say, okay, I'm going on my adventure. That's the first act of a story when we talk about story structure, right? And so now when we get into this adventure, we get into the world of adventure. We're going to meet other archetypes for sure. We're going to meet allies. Your hero is going to find their fellow travelers. Maybe there will be other people on a similar journey. Think of the Hunger Games. Katniss goes to the capital, and there's a whole community of young people who have all been called to participate in this same very dangerous adventure. When Dorothy Gale arrives in Oz and she gets her mission from the mentor figure of Glinda, the Good Witch, who tells her exactly what to do and what shoes to wear while she's doing it, the first thing that happens to Dorothy when she starts taking her path of adventure, which happens to be a yellow brick road, is she starts to meet allies. She meets a Tin Man. She meets a Scarecrow. She meets a Cowardly Lion. They form a band of fellow travelers. And by the time the second act really develops, we start to understand that they need each other, that she would never have been able to do this on her own. So the ally archetype is one of the archetypes that it's a helping figure. It's that co-traveler, right? It is not the best friend who takes over the plot and tells your hero what to do. That is a different problem. The hero still is at the center of the tale. And it's one of the things that we must be careful about in designing the secondary cast of characters, especially in the second act, is to not pick one of them to be the guide that just is pushing your hero from one scene to the other. Don't make one of the allies the most interesting character in the book who always seems to have the map, the key, the answer, and says, I know, and so that your hero can move to the next one. Your hero is going to be the one doing all of that stuff. So ally is a very, very important part of the archetypal buffet of energy that your story is going to run on. But that is the pitfall often with an ally. There will be enemies too. There will be just adversaries, your garden variety adversaries, forces and figures that are simply there to stand in the hero's way. They may be working for someone, right? They may be henchmen of some kind. They may be figures who represent a much more serious obstacle. We're going to get to that in a minute, but they might just be, the normal forces of adversaries that come along as your hero continues to try very, very hard, test after test after test in the second act to get to their promised destination at the end of their mission. All right, now we're going to talk about two of my favorites, the trickster archetype and the shapeshifter archetype. Oh, I love these so much. These are such delicious archetypal energies. Let me talk about the trickster. The trickster, the great, Bugs Bunny archetype, the great clown, the one who can outwit, the one who makes jokes, the one who keeps your hero sometimes amused. Sometimes the trickster can be there to lift your hero's spirits, which is a tremendous source of archetypal energy. That's a tremendous boost, right? A little comic relief in the story. But that's not the true value of what a trickster can do. A trickster is like the force of a storytelling energy that gets brought to bear when your hero's ego or rigidity or stubbornness or self-importance is standing in the way of their journey of transformation. Now, again, this is quite psychologically accurate in real life. People who are very rigid in their identities and very ego bound don't learn easily, because to learn something new means to be willing to change your mind. It means to be willing to rethink your position, or to be able to resituate your own identity in the larger scheme of things. New information comes in and we have to draw a new map of the territory, including the territory of the self. If you are locked in a mindset where this feels threatening, you are not going to learn the lessons that life is throwing your way. And what is needed at a moment like that is a banana peel, is something to get you over yourself, to take a pin and pop the overinflated balloon of your ego, to force you to laugh at yourself, to put down this like hard, lockdown, stubborn clinging to an identity that might be ready to go long past its sell by date. So think about the value of a trickster in that capacity. In a very classical sense, you can look at characters like King Lear's fool. And traditionally, of course, this is why the king had a fool, because a king run amok with an unbridled ego is a very dangerous thing. And so the fool becomes a corrective, a very valuable and important corrective to power. So that is the trickster archetype, incredibly fun to work with. And I just got a couple more, and then we are going to dive deep into all your questions. And I love these questions that are coming in. So the penultimate one that I want to talk about is the shapeshifter. Now, the Incredible Hulk is a shapeshifter, right? Looks one way, but then he loses his temper and he hulks out, right? A shapeshifter can be that kind of character. It can have a literal capacity to change shape, or to change appearance, like a chameleon. But in a more nuanced and symbolic way, the shapeshifter archetype is anything that is, coming into your hero's journey that is not what it seems, that is concealing its true motives, that is keeping your hero guessing, causing uncertainty, as to the point where maybe the reader is not clear, right? The reader doesn't know the true motives of the shapeshifter. This is an incredibly fascinating character. Very often, a love interest in a story can have a quality of being a shapeshifter. If the hero of your tale thinks that they're one thing, they're interested, they're not interested. Oh, now things are good. Well, then things run cold. The vicissitudes of a love story often involve a tremendous amount of shapeshifter energy. And that is what keeps the reader hooked, is not knowing from one scene to the next, is this going to work out or not? Are they together or not? Shapeshifter archetypes are tremendously fascinating. One of the great familiar shapeshifter archetypes of recent children's fiction, of course, is the character of Snape in the Harry Potter series. You read book after book of the Harry Potter series, and just like the protagonist, just like Harry himself, we don't know whose side Snape is on. We think we know, and then he does something that makes us question it, right? We're like, what? Whose side is he on? Is he with him? Is he against him? Who is he working for? A spy character is carrying a tremendous battery pack of shapeshifter energy, because maybe they're pretending to be somebody that they're not in order to fulfill their role in the plot. So interesting. Think about how fascinating shapeshifters are to the reader, and you get a sense of what valuable story energy they add to your hero's journey. And last but not least, and then we're going to get to all your questions, the shadow archetype. Now, I talked earlier just about enemies, adversaries, right? The shadow is more than that. It can be that, but the shadow is much more than that. Whose shadow is it? When we talk about the shadow archetype, whose shadow is it? It's the hero's shadow. There's something about a shadow archetype that is, shares an outline, shares some key qualities with your hero, so that when they encounter each other, there is a sense of, if things don't go well, I could end up like you. They become like the Star Trek episode where Spock has a beard, right? It's like, wait a minute, are you me or am I you? It has this very deep resonant quality that goes a lot further than just a bad guy, a henchman. Sometimes in a story, the shadow figure is the figure who's trying to destroy the hero. They might be on opposite sides of a war. They might be on opposite sides of whatever arena of combat, whether literal or symbolic, that your story is examining. So there might be like a kind of a grudging respect, like if in different circumstances we could be friends, like that quality that you see sometimes in extremely compelling storytelling, where you have a character who's not the hero but occupies such an incredibly energized space in the story, so that when they and the hero finally come into contact with each other, it's electric. And that is, in a psychological sense, of course, also the psychological shadow, what your hero has buried within them, the things that they don't want to admit, the very same flaws that they find so unappealing in others, they may discover in themselves, right? So the shadow has this very deeply personal quality. So those are some cool archetypal energies, right? So much fun to think about designing a cast of secondary characters that contribute all of that energy to your hero's journey of transformation. Now, let us go back to some of these amazing questions. And the theme here in these questions, I'm just going to look at them for a second. So one of the themes I want to talk about is this question that I put up earlier from Rosalind, is can a character have multiple archetypal energies at play? So in Rosalind's question, she asked, can a character be encouraging, energizing, and challenging? Well, can someone be those things? Absolutely. Sometimes people love us and give us the tough love. That person is encouraging, but they're also challenging, right? So they are acting both as ally and as mentor. But here's the thing I want to be clear about. And I'm going to put your other question up again, Rosalind, because this is really the key. Can a character transform from one archetype to another as the hero story progresses? The answer is not only yes, but it's not even necessarily a character who delivers these archetypal energies to the tale. Just as a herald in my own Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place series, right? There's a herald archetype at the very beginning that we meet in flashback in chapter 1, when we learn that the reason that our hero is on a train to Ashton Place on the way to her very first job interview is that her mentor figure, the headmistress of her former school, found an advertisement in the newspaper for a particular type of governess experience with animals strongly preferred, and literally pushed the advertisement in front of Penelope's face saying, okay, this job is for you, take it. The newspaper is the herald. Miss Mortimer is a mentor and the deliverer of the invitation to adventure that sets the story in motion, right? So you see there's layering that goes on, right? There's layering that goes on. When a character is pouring a particular flavor of story energy into the tale, we can think of them not necessarily as being that archetype, but as wearing the mask of that archetype or performing the function of that archetype. Because the energy is not so much a quality of them as it is what the hero needs right now. It's like gas stations, it's not about the gas station. It's about putting the gas in the car, right? It's like your hero is the vehicle that's going through the story, and they will need energy. The story will need energy to progress. The hero will need energy to become bigger than what they are. We can't make something out of nothing. And so we need all of these different types of energy to be contributed to the tale in order for your hero to progress. So it's a little bit more subtle than, does a character transform from one to another? Can a character pump one kind of gas in one scene and another kind of gas in another scene? Yeah. Does that character in your own design as a storyteller, does that character have a backstory and an identity and their own set of problems, and perhaps, as Nancy asked in her question, perhaps even a little arc of change of their own? They very well may. They very well may. However, to the extent that they function as an archetypal energy in your story, it's the impact that they have on the hero's journey that matters. Now, this is super important. Why? Because sometimes we get ideas for lots of characters, and sometimes we want to keep our story interesting. We want to add new things. We want to just keep throwing stuff in to keep it going, to keep, we don't necessarily trust that our one hero on their mission of change is enough. And so we just keep adding new things. It's like accessorizing. We keep accessorizing the outfit. We don't trust that the outfit is enough. We don't listen to the advice of Coco Chanel, who said, get dressed, and then before you leave the house, remove one thing. Now you're perfect. We don't trust the outfit, and so we keep throwing things on it. And sometimes one of the things we throw in our story is a surfeit, an excess of secondary characters. Everywhere our hero goes, we feel like we have to invent a whole new cast of interesting, quirky, diverting characters to keep the reader interested, to keep ourselves interested. You tell me in the chat why we might have the impulse to do that. But what I'm here to tell you is that listen to Coco Chanel, and also listen to our great writing mentor, E.B. White, who told us that just like a well-designed machine, a sentence should have no unnecessary words, and a story should have no unnecessary parts. So if a character truly is delivering archetypal energy that is essential to get the hero along their journey, that is a necessary part. If they are just a bunch of partygoers who sort of wander in stage left and divert the reader, for a while and then wander off again, you have to wonder why they're there. What characters do you already have who could add this kind of story energy? Why do you need to go and enter a whole new gang each time we have a whole new scene? Now, this is not to discourage you from adding characters, but what I do want you to do is I want you to be very discerning about why each character's in that scene. You may have a scene that has a character who only appears in that one scene, and yet delivers such a powerful blast of storytelling energy in that one scene that it's absolutely essential. I'm going to go back to our Wizard of Oz image and talk about a scene that people don't talk about as much, right? Because we were always like, oh, Oz, Oz, Oz. One of my favorite scenes in that movie happens right at the beginning before she ever gets to Oz, right? The neighbor comes and says, give me that dog, right? She's going to take the dog away. And Dorothy's so upset because the dog is her true only friend. And so she decides to run away from home. And where does she end up? You guys probably remember. She ends up at this little encampment of this, traveling con artist, clearly, right? This fellow who's just, he's running a little bit of a racket. And he figures out right away that she's run away. And he takes out his crystal ball and he's, spitting a whole tale. But what he does is he, quickly determines that she's run away from home and that she needs to, go back. And he tricks her. He pretends that he can see Auntie M and that she's sick and she needs her. And he is the first one who sets Dorothy on the mission to go home. He's the one who says, you need to, your aunt's missing you. She's crying. They're sad. They're looking for you. And Dorothy's like, I need to go home. They need me. And that's it. And so her journey home begins there. It doesn't necessarily begin when she lands in Kansas. It begins there. Let's look at the archetypal energy that character, who is, of course, played by the same actor who's later going to play the wizard, who's an old Kansas con man himself. But he is a mentor because he actually can see in Dorothy what she herself does not see yet, which is that what she really needs to do is go home and make things right at home, not run away from home, but go home. So he delivers this powerful thematic mission to her. And he creates, information that's false. So we can call him a herald, but it's not true necessarily that Auntie M has been suddenly taken ill and is calling for Dorothy. But he gives information to the story. He delivers the mission to Dorothy, and he's a liar. He's a total shapeshifter. He's not what he appears to be. Can you call him a trickster too? You could, because he's extremely funny. There's some huge, incredibly funny jokes in that scene as well. Look at all of that archetypal energy. Talk about a cocktail. That is potent stuff. We never see that character again. It's a super quick scene. Now, later on, of course, the character of the wizard has echoes with that character. But early on in the movie, that scene just, it's just like a blast of story energy. And it is literally what gets the plot going. So that's an example of a character who's just rocking all the different moves, right? This character is just doing it all. And look at the impact it has on the hero and on the storytelling. Now, Nancy has a terrific question here. I'm going to just bring it up. Do allies have their own arcs? Very often they do, Nancy. And I'll tell you one thing. So much depends. As it always, right? We're not prescribing one size fits all. You are an artist. You are writing a story that you are drawing from the deep well of your own interests and passions and wisdom about life. And you might be writing a picture book, or you might be writing a 5-part, series of epic novels. I don't know what you're writing. You're going to figure that out. But if you have a very long story, chances are that the secondary characters are going to get promoted, some of them, into the level of subplot, what we call a subplot, because we're going to be spending enough time with them that they are going to take on like 3 full dimensions. They're going to go through an experience of their own. And so those arcs, those secondary arcs, we call subplots. In a shorter work, a less complicated work, it's not necessary for the secondary characters to have huge journeys of transformation. But when your hero does her job right, by the time she gets to the end of the tale, other characters are going to be impacted by her willingness to go through this difficult journey. In shifting her own consciousness, she will shift the world around her. If not Dorothy, the Tin Man doesn't get a heart and the Scarecrow doesn't get a brain, right? Think of the impact that her journey has on her fellow travelers. They too have an arc. If you look at their stories from their own point of view, the Tin Man's rusted, right? Until something happens that never happened before. A girl with a kind heart comes by and grabs the oil can and mentors him back to life. And then they go on an adventure together. And during that adventure, he deals with what he perceives to be his great internal flaw, is that he doesn't have a heart. And then by the end of the tale, he discovers that he's given the chance to change his identity. Did he have a heart all along? Of course he does. He's the most sentimental and sweet character among them. They all have within them what they need, just as Dorothy could have gone home all along. But because she goes through the journey, it's time for my hydration break. Hang on one second. Because she goes through the journey, they reap the benefits. They are part of the world around her that is improved and kind of blessed by what she's been willing to do. So you can easily see that they have a journey of transformation as well. It's like a miniature version of hers. But hers is the main one, and hers is what provides like the little trigger for their journeys of change to happen. That's a great question, Nancy. I'm glad you brought that up. All right, my friends. As you can see, I find this a very, very exciting topic. I'm just going to take a quick review to see. Oh, here, I'm going to bring up one more question before we wrap up today. Terry has noted, wisely noted, the way that personal hangups can be threshold guardians. She asked it as a question, but I know she knows the answer is yes. Therefore, the hero's change can be defeating these personal demons. Now, the truth is that every journey of transformation of consciousness of necessity involves defeating some kind of personal demon, right? Of growing larger than we previously were. This can happen in subtle ways in a narrative. It can happen in very dramatic ways in a narrative. Look at Ebenezer Scrooge. Can we talk about a personal hang-up? He's so greedy and his heart is so shut down. We're going to find out eventually that his heart was broken, and he kind of, his descent into being mercenary lost him the great love of his life, and his heart was broken, and it just made him more unfeeling, more unwilling to feel tenderness, and more unwilling to examine his values until he is forced to in one unforgettable night. So even though that plot involves the arrival of 3 ghosts on Christmas Eve and all kinds of fantastic invention, it is only and always the internal journey of change that makes a story great. And so what Terry notes is very important, which is that the internal stuff of your story is where it's at. Depending on what type of story it is, you are going to also invent some external plot that is like the visible part of the iceberg, right? That's the part that is out there in the open. We can see the ghosts arriving. We can see Ebenezer Scrooge being shown these things and having these epiphanies and arguing with the ghosts and vowing to do better. That's all happening on the outside. We can see it. But what's really happening is this internal shift of him. His inner compass is getting set right again because of all this, not because of, but that is the visible manifestation. That's what makes it a story. It's something that we can tell somebody. And I will end by saying that I think that that's really a valuable way to think of it, is that when we envision a story, we are seeking to communicate to others as some invisible truth. And the story is how we represent that invisible truth in a visible way so that we can connect with others, right? The truth is that I'm inside of me and you're inside of you. And as much as we can love each other and communicate with each other, we still are on these beautiful separate islands. It's the existential dilemma of being human. So much has been written about it. And we're always striving to connect, right? We're always striving to feel that energy going back and forth. And storytelling is one of the ancient, enduring, and profound, powerful, transformative ways that humans have to do this. It's why these mythic archetypes are so present and so powerful in stories. This is deep, ancient stuff. So That's what I've got for you guys today. Wonderful discussion. Really, really great. Oh, I noticed, Paul, I just noticed you added something that I didn't address. So let me, before I wrap up, I want to make sure to see this. Not a question, but an observation, so that you are looking at characters who feel like they want what they want, and whether the hero's in the way or not is secondary. It may look like that for sure. You know, a well-conceived character, secondary character in a narrative is going to be fully imagined, and they'll have their own set of motives. But do not fall into the trap of thinking that everybody is just in their own story and that the stories are just happen to be colliding at this moment. That character's set of motives and what they want, when it comes into opposition with your heroes trying to achieve, fine, that they're a threshold guardian, they're an enemy, maybe they are the shadow of your hero's story, but they only belong in your hero's narrative to the extent that they have an impact on it. If they don't have an impact on it, you have to sort of wonder if that's extraneous, whether that's something that is not essential, or that is an attempt, to kind of let some other narrative hijack the hero's journey for a little while, which I don't recommend generally. Another thing that you can use this material to help you decide, by the way, is whether you've got in a scene, on a scenic level, whether you've got multiple characters playing the same energetic roles. And that doesn't mean that you can't, but it means that you must be very, very careful about how to do it, because you don't need 5 characters being threshold guardians when 1 will do, or when 3 will do in a particular scene. So you can have a very rich cast of characters if your narrative warrants it, but they've all got to be rowing. Everyone's got to be pulling some weight. They've got to be adding something to the overall propulsion of the story, and that's why they're there. So once again, I thank you all for coming today. It's always such a treat. I hope this was of benefit. And if you liked it, press subscribe on the YouTube channel. I would love to have you as a subscriber. You can even press the little thumbs up to let me know that you liked it. If you have more questions, leave a comment. I will answer them. I love to keep the conversation going. And if you are interested in knowing more about A Path of the Storyteller, you can just go and sign up at my website, which is pathofthestoryteller.com. You'll end up on the mailing list, and you will be first to know about some fun upcoming trainings that I have planned for you. Thank you all so much for coming. I look forward to seeing you next time.